so upset. That's a shame. That was such an interesting discussion. Sorry. Let's see if that works again. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. I think the connection went off. There's Sidi Abaka. Let me get him to join again. Sorry about that, people. That was a shame. I don't know. Sorry about that.
Alhamdulillah, it's the technology. What can we do?
So yeah, we'll start. I lost that line. That was actually so interesting, but inshallah we'll carry on.
Yeah.
This is the way technology works. But yeah, so I was saying that as I was growing up, being black was synonymous with being Caribbean. So and more so Jamaican. So our vernacular, our terminology was like a Jamaican patois, wagwan, and even our music. So and to be fair, regardless of where you're from, all black people seem to adopt that, and they were fine with that. So we listen to Caribbean, Jamaican music, for example, and the dance hall and the reggae, and that was not an issue for us.
Yeah, because of this need of man to belong. So this is why I was saying that aspect of identity is actually quite arbitrary.
Yes.
I mean, I spent a year in South London because I didn't grow up here.
Yes.
And I remember there's a guy called Snowflake.
Yeah.
who used to he used to chant on the mic.
Yes.
And he spoke patois.
Okay.
He wasn't from Jamaica. He was from South London, but he smoked. I mean, you'd think that he came from Spanish Town or something.
Wow.
Yeah. But because it was an identity which he felt part of.
Yes.
And
so with that identity in the UK, it was very interesting that in its opposite, being African was very he was a diss to be African.
Well, also because remember that basic identity had been formed in the Caribbean, or from a Caribbean base.
Yes.
And the people were told very terrible things about Africans,
Wow.
So as I discovered, Africans were told about people from the Americas.
Yes.
Right. So it was. I mean, well, it's called divide and rule.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. So the Africans came, and people had quite disparaging things and most people had never been to Africa.
Yes.
Yeah. So a lot of that began to change, especially when the Rastas went to places like Ethiopia and Ghana and Gambia and came back. And so then that began, so a very different discourse began to disseminate within the community, etc. So that all of this tells you about the very arbitrary dynamics that form an identity, because even within that, we still formed a very common Black UK identity.
Yeah. And so basically, before I want to probe more, but just a very basic question: how is identity important, and if so, how important is it?
Well, if you don't have a sense of belonging, you will go mad.
Okay.
It is essential to the formation of a healthy psyche.
Yes.
And that is the problem of that the racist identity constructions. That is the problem, because it is based upon the rejection.
Mm-hmm.
So then there's a tension within the society of rejection, and then and disgust and animosity are very natural things once you establish that kind of identity, of those kinds of identity tensions, or that identity dialectic.
Yes.
So there is a background level of rejection, which is primarily felt by Blacks, but can be also felt by minority whites in a majority Black area. Yeah. So it's because of it is This is a very clever, I mean, I call it a technology. It is a technique.
Okay.
It's a very effective technique
Okay.
for management of people.
Okay. I mean, the question is then, like, I mean, even before we even get to the difference between the blackness in the UK context and blackness in America,
Mm-hmm.
are we, when we call out the anti-race, okay, with the whole BLM movement, that's obviously been sparked by what happened to George Floyd, obviously.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Since our black experience in the UK is different to the one in America, why should we feel some kind of attachment to that experience then?
Well, the fact that blackness and whiteness were formed in the crucible of the United States, especially, in particular,
Yeah.
and then exported to the rest of the world,
Yeah.
then we share in some of that identity.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the British far right is heavily influenced by the American far right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so we share in some of that identity, and we share in that experience because it's the same methodology of control.
Yes.
What the problem is, because the American situation is so pervasive in its capacity to market itself,
Yes.
is that often what happens is that we do not respond to our very local situation.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, and that is political suicide for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, how was so now let's probe that now. What are the different demarcating factors or the things that differentiate the blackness in the UK as opposed to blackness in America?
Well, first of all, we are generally a post-colonial people.
Yes.
Many of us have an experience of rule.
Yes.
In places.
Yes.
So that you find that we can enter a place and like Britain or the United States and make use of many of the social mechanisms or the social opportunities, which in a way that can be very difficult for people who have been acclimatized within that. Right. So you'll see that people from the Caribbean and from Africa will go into the United States and they will dominate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes actually can be quite disparaging to
African Americans.
To African Americans.
Yes.
And I think that is quite stupid.
Yes, of course.
Because this is the whole thing of affirmative action. There are many kinds of affirmative actions, right? Because you're coming with a very different experience and very different expectations.
Yes.
We don't recognize the importance of those things. Yeah. And often what happens is that we ignore the experience of the American blacks.
Yes.
Because they're telling you, be careful. Okay. Yeah. And in a generation, you end up in exactly the same boat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they have knowledge of this of how it works. I mean, the same dynamic is at play in Britain.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the blacks who came across to Britain were generally quite poor.
Yes.
Many cases not very well educated. The Africans who came across often didn't. They were sometimes very well educated.
Yes.
So then they fell into the same trap of looking down upon the Caribbean blacks, although they joined the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they fell victim to exactly the same.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, so this is so we have very similar. These dynamics remain similar.
Yeah.
So we're coming in different waves. It is not only about identity, but it's also about institutions. Right, institutions within which you're able to establish continuity, because this is why I keep talking about ethnic identities.
Yeah.
because for an ethnos to survive, it must establish institutions.
Okay.
Yeah. And so some of those institutions may be things like how you raise children and how knowledge and responsibility passes
Yeah.
from one generation to the other. Yeah. And in order for that to happen, people will establish institutions. They might be buildings, or they might be organizations,
Yeah.
you know, or they may just be methods. Yeah. And so what has happened is that because of the way that we identify ourselves by race, we often end up not being able to share that is the development of common institutions. And I'll give you an example.
Yes, please.
When the West Indians came over here in the 1950s, 1960s,
Yeah.
they established pirate radio stations.
Yes.
70s. They transformed the nature of radio in the British Isles.
Yeah.
So part of the problem that they had is that because they had not come from people who had been traditionally involved in government, etc., they didn't formalize anything, and so they remained illegal pirate radio stations.
Yeah.
So then the state reaches out and says, okay, what we'll do is we'll give you licenses.
Yeah.
But for the licenses, you have to apply. So if you apply, you must leave I think it was 10 or 20,000.
Wow.
So you gathered the money, you deposited it with the authority, and they granted the licenses. They granted.
Yeah.
But you didn't get your money back. You see?
Yeah.
So by not having common institutions, what happened is you get picked off separately. And and so at present, one of the things that you're seeing sometimes is you're seeing Africans being played off against West Indians.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So and this is a twofold problem. One is that if you don't recognize you don't recognize the ethnic nature.
Yeah.
Then if you recognize that, then you understand you have to make alliances.
Yes, of course.
If we're all black,
then
in a way you're saying it doesn't exist, but at the same time it does.
Okay.
And if you don't, this is the creation. If you don't make allowance for what Allah has put there, it's al-haq.
Yeah.
The haq is the haq. You're not changing it, you know. So what happens? The haq comes up against the batil, and it breaks his head.
Of course.
You get broken.
Yes. But then, okay, so just how we spoke about how blackness has a different experience from its origins in terms of blackness in the UK and blackness in America. We spoke about obviously the need for building common institutions based on that blackness. Has whiteness gone through the same process?
Yes, I mean that's why the split was made in the first place.
Yes.
Yeah. So it has survived by building very effective institutions. Right. The police is a classic.
Yes.
The police was made to police.
Yes.
When it came to police blacks, they didn't lose their prejudice.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a guy called Dale Semper, who is presently dealing with a case against the Met.
Okay.
In 2017, he was a bank manager.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah. The same story. Yeah. So they arrested him.
Yeah.
Because they didn't like the fact that he had a lovely car and he had money.
Yes.
They froze his bank accounts, and he's still in prison. He's still in the courts dealing with the fallout.
Yeah,
they have destroyed the man's career.
Yeah.
You know, I always remember one day I'm chatting with a friend of mine, a Nigerian friend of mine, and he was in his car. He had a Mercedes. I think it was outside which state? It was one of the Victoria line in the the east of London.
Yeah.
So, you know, and he and I, so he and I were sitting chatting. A van of police stop. They jump out, get out of the car.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at them. Then they search the car. They search us. I have some cigars.
Yeah.
So when they see the cigars, they look at me, go, "Oh, we got you here." So I watch them and I smile because, well, of course, it's a black man. It can't be cigars. It must be ganja or something, you know. And so they really, how I dealt with them, they had to let me go, but they arrested my Nigerian friend, and I, you know, had to arrange to make sure that the lawyers went down to deal with that.
Wow.
Right now, all of this was because they didn't like the fact that we were sitting in a Mercedes.
And you know, it's interesting you say that. That story of black men driving nice cars has been something I've heard from people, from my friends, and stories online. That's like a reoccurring theme.
Yeah.
Especially in the UK when it comes to the police.
Yeah. But you see, also what I've also recognized that it's also something to do with class.
Okay.
Because often the police will stop me.
Yes.
And what I will do is I'll remain silent. When I open my mouth, they kind of step back. And they go, "So you're not a lawyer, are you?" Yeah, because now they're going, okay, because basically it's a predatorial behavior.
Yes.
So they're trying to pick on people that they think are easy targets.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So once you don't fit the profile, they go, "Whoa, wait a minute. This might have blowback."
Yes.
Right? So if they think there's blowback, then they tend to back off.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that tells you, because in dealing with the dynamic, you know, we have to recognize it is a predatorial behavior.
Wow.
And yeah, and often talking to my white friends, they can't believe it. And half the time I could see, because it's not part of their experience, unless they've probably been in the car with you over time. They really don't believe it. I get it.
Yes.
In fact, sometimes I just find it useless because they look at you and I go, "Well, yeah," I mean, because they know you, they don't think you lie, but they can't fathom it.
Yeah.
So one of the nice things I think about this issue of George Floyd and the BLM is that it's brought that up in their faces. You know, some of them have had to acknowledge that.
Exactly. And then we spoke about this last time, but please just touch on it again. So in the formation of these racial identities that we have, how did it come up? Not how did white supremacy get into that, basically? And then you know, I think it's very important to say, because people feel like white supremacy, it sounds so harsh. Yeah, it sounds like a really hard thing, white supremacy. People say no, we don't. You know, I don't believe I'm better than anyone. I believe we're all equal, you might say. Or people might say all lives matter. Or, you know, we're all, you know, I don't believe I'm superior. You know what I mean? So how do we confront that discussion and say how do we confront that discussion and prove that white supremacy is actually a thing?
Well, again, you really have to go back to how the thing was formed. If you explain to people that basically, you know, how whiteness came about.
Yes.
Because whiteness didn't exist before 16 something.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
As a terminology and a methodology that develops there, because they had to split those two groups of people. And whiteness was established to ensure the dominance of Europeans.
Yes.
When they had different ethnic identities and could be easily separated, they established a supra-ethnic identity, which is whiteness. So, you know, really, once you understand that, then arguing against white supremacy is a fool's errand.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think one of the things is really we need to educate ourselves and on others on the history of how we got here.
Okay.
And
you mean
also,
not just physically, but I mean more like intellectually almost.
Yeah, because this is an elegant construct.
Yes.
Right? And so what happens is that because it's so elegant, it's because it's becomes so powerful, so fundamental to our identities, we never question it.
Yeah.
Right? So the moment you enter into it as that accepting that black and white are not arbitrary identities, then you've lost, because it's done, right? Because it's set up to be white against black. Or then you turn around and you say you're equal. If you turn around and you collapse the construct, the question of equality never comes.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because it's nonsense.
Yes.
Yeah. So when people are talking about equality, I'm kind of scratching my head.
Please expand on that. Why?
Well, when a plumber comes to do a job in your house, and you got a burst pipe, you really care whether he's black or white?
No.
You want somebody who can do the job.
Exactly.
Right. So what I'm saying is that in that essential nature of man.
Yeah.
When our backs are up against the wall, we recognize it is viability.
Yes.
Right. And you don't want, if you have somebody who is supposed to be white and a jackass, you don't want him to be your lawyer.
Of course.
Okay. So on that level, we recognize it.
Yeah.
What it is that when our backs are not against the wall, then we can afford the arbitrariness. Right? So so that's it. I mean, often sometimes what I'm saying is about equality is that once you collapse the argument of the racist argument, then you have to recognize the humanity of the person that you're dealing with.
Exactly.
And that tells you what it's designed to do. It is designed to dehumanize one and humanize the other.
Yeah.
That's why I call it a technology. It is a very well-crafted system of technique.
And these are the kind of unconscious biases that people have. White people and black people as well. Many black people have internalized, it's like, again, I always quote Dr. Cornel West because I follow him quite closely. He says, he meets white people and they say, I've got over racism, or I don't see color. I don't subscribe, or the question of white supremacy doesn't even come to my mind. And Dr. Cornel West retorts with, well, you must be superhuman because I'm black, been fighting racism for 60 years, and I'm still affected by white supremacy internally. I've internalized white supremacy still. I mean, how many times we see, for example, the white gaze is what people go after. It has to be approved by white people for it to be worthy. This is from black people say this. I've had people say things like, talk properly, or you sound, or you sound white. You sound white.
Yeah.
Black people saying this at times.
Well, it's really fascinating. I remember when I came to England, I was hanging out with some Etonians.
Yeah.
And I meet her. So I go to Brixton because we want to get some food.
Yeah.
So I met a Rasta man that I knew, and he and I were talking, and the guy's mouth fell open. He goes, like, you can speak like that? I say, yeah, why? And he goes, no, don't, don't speak like that. And I'm going to myself, wait a minute. We have like double entendre, triple entendre. We can say one thing and mean three things, right? Suggest all three things at the same time. And you have to make an effort to do that.
Yeah.
We do it almost like that, that's
Exactly.
part of our, yeah. And I realized that there was something, they were assumptions that they were making, so that they couldn't see that they couldn't see that natural intelligence because they'd been set up to think what intelligence was. Right? and that was set up, but that had been established by whites. So I really, and then I started really studying the dynamics, because the thing about it is that if a man gives you a stick, beat him with it. That's, if he wants to fight you, take it. If he gives you the stick, take it and beat him with it. That's what we say in our vernacular, right? So if I could predict how you're going to deal with me, then I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it against you.
Yeah, of course.
Right. And so I did, and but what doing that allowed me to do is to see how utterly arbitrary and stupid it was. And Akala has raised some incredible issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Akala has this thing, he does Shakespeare in rap.
Yes.
And sometimes he'll bring in Nas or he'll bring in Eminem, and you couldn't tell the difference between whether it was Shakespeare or them, right?
Yes.
Because people don't think that these guys are eloquent.
Yes.
Or that the language is elegant.
Exactly.
And they might cuss, but their language is elegant and intelligent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, the thing is, we're not going to solve racism in one live or 100 lives, but in terms of moving forward, in the moment that we have right now, where people are forced to, a lot of white people. What's very kind of promising to me, and I know many from the older than me have said, is that in the protests that I've seen, I've personally been to, about 50% of people are actually white.
Yes.
And people are saying that, we are actually, for the first time in our life, having to confront our whiteness and the construct of whiteness. So I think that's quite promising. But in terms of moving forward, and not a solution based, but in terms of moving forward with the momentum that we have today, what are some of the things we need to be wary of? What are some of the messages that we should be putting out?
Historically, you have to choose some areas you have to choose some things and you have to stick with them, because at the end of this, people will go back to many of the things that they were doing.
Yeah.
One of the things one of the things I think we really have to do is to ensure that we have a voice in popular culture and things like the BBC, in which we have programs actually addressing these matters.
Of course.
Right? Because that is how you maintain the discourse. The discourse of academics is secured en masse in film.
Yes.
Yeah. In the last generation, two generations, it was with a novel.
Yeah.
Since the 70s, it has been film.
Film. Yeah.
So we have to secure our position in film, and there are things like Netflix, etc. We have to secure that and speak about these matters, and that's already happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Two is that we have to support Black or economies within the areas that we are in.
Yes, of course.
Right. We have to support. We have to build economy in those areas, and we have to ensure, and we have to make sure that when the police or the state overstep, that we put our money and fight.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
We have to put our money together and fight.
Yeah.
Fund lawyers, fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think out of this will come many things. If we can secure those two things, I think we have hope.
Okay.
One of the way that our political system works is that, you might go and see your MP.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you know what? Gather some money and support the things that he does if he's working in your interest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what people will do is they go and they go like they're begging.
Yes.
What we need to do is to realize we're not begging nothing. We have to go as influencers.
Yes.
because that's how politics works. That's how the political system
like
works.
a donor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
become donors. And the knowledge of the Caribbean and the African elite,
Yeah.
we have to integrate that into the British black politic.
Yes.
Right. So we, traveling to places, doing business in those places, etc. Because we there's a particular kind of expertise that we need.
Yeah.
And when you deal with a young black man here, you want a few ambassadors, etc., turning up there.
Yes.
Right. We need to begin to operate in a very different way.
Yes. No, I agree. Just one of my last questions. People, if you have any questions regarding what we've spoken about, race, the formation of identity, or if you have any health questions, feel free to put the questions in the comments or reach out to Alexander Carberry. Every week I say it again, he's the author of Know Yourself, which is an awesome book everyone needs to get. I recommend it highly, where he speaks about the personality types, and it's an amazing book which can be read in like a day, but I highly recommend it. Just a question. Again, I think we're gonna have another conversation again, but just to kind of, I want to throw it out there, and I want to know I'm gonna get what you think. Because someone I see someone who is very clued up on race and the formation of identity. When we talk about being pro-black, it's a bit of a random curveball question I'm gonna throw at you. Can you be pro-black and marry non-black?
Listen, if you're going to be in a place and you don't amalgamate,
yes,
and you don't establish alliances,
yes,
then we will be split in the way that we have continually.
okay,
Okay? The thing is, there are natural human dynamics.
yes,
This is designed to break natural human dynamics. What we have to do is rip it apart.
yes,
and bring something. We have to just bring what is natural.
yes,
Okay? People go to school together, they grow up together, they're attracted to each other. It's gonna happen.
yes,
Yeah? Now, the people who do that, the people who have been in this land have experience and they know the institutions.
yes,
Right? So you've arrived, you marry the two things, and because you must lever political power, political and economic power.
yes,
Okay? We are being pro-black
yes,
because the system has forced us to deal with ourselves in that way.
yes,
But as long as this technology remains,
yes,
we are in trouble. Okay? For instance, this is how it is used, okay? The chav, the council house and violent.
yes,
So what happens is that you don't invest in poor white areas.
yeah,
You don't build institutions, etc. And then when the issues come, you name it a pathology, chav. So you don't have to take responsibility. They are pathological.
wow,
Right? So as long as you allow politicians to get away with such simple and stupid techniques. I mean, the techniques are so stupid, right? So and historically, we have provided people like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. I mean, we have provided the moral and spiritual core of the situation and the creative one.
Yeah.
Rock and roll.
Yeah, exactly.
Is from Little Richard.
Exactly.
Okay, or the modern shape of rock and roll is by Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
The Beatles, Eric Clapton, they were all with Little Richard.
Yeah.
He is the architect of modern rock and roll. But then because of segregation, they made it white music.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want black artists having access to innocent white girls.
Yes.
Right. So you understand?
Yeah.
So we have to just tear the whole thing up.
Yeah.
Tear it up, rip it up, turn the chessboard upside down and bring something new, because nobody benefits.
Yes. Yes.
Right? And this is what Allah says. He says that He made you of different
Tribes and
nations and tribes. He didn't say races to recognize each other.
Exactly.
That's no way to be seen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nah, it's super interesting. I'm trying to think. I had a question slip my mind, so if it comes back to me. Any questions? People who are watching, any questions, any comments you want to leave before we finish? People are really enjoying this in the comments. No, I am as well. This has been fascinating. Oh, sorry. Yes. Last question. How do we understand the phenomena of those black people who are used as mouthpieces for what white people wish they can say? Is it pathological? Is it just greed? Is it just...
It's good, smart strategy.
Okay.
It's good, smart strategy.
Yeah.
You know,
just add a caveat. What I've noticed though, almost in every single case where I've seen these types of people who are adopted by the right wing to speak on two black people as a black person, their spouses are never black.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's good strategy.
Okay.
Right. You know, I mean, because, well, you black people are saying that, but this one's black and they're saying that too. They don't say nothing. I mean, you know, you could say, well, you're killing cows. Here's a cow that agrees that he should be killed.
Yeah.
You know, and
someone said, Jazakallah khair, Brother Alexandra. The discussion was helpful. Can you please share something from the life of Malcolm X that you feel that we often overlook that will help a Muslim today?
The greatest thing about Malcolm X, may Allah have mercy upon his soul, and I think he's a wali because of it, is his integrity and justice. One of the things I'm seeing with Muslims is they think they can have an Islam without justice.
Yes.
Without standing for justice. That is a corrupt piece of thing that is almost as bad as what is in the toilet. It is corrupt.
Yes.
Yeah, and we will, if Muslims have that, you will arrive on the Yawm al-Qiyamah in front of Allah, and He is going to question you about what you did in this earth. You cannot have the deen without justice. Yes. Justice is ibadah.
Yes. It is worship. Yes.
Yes. Justice is worship.
Yes.
So be just and establish justice, even if it is against yourselves. Yes. That is Quran.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And if you think you will just stand up in the masjid and pray all the time, I'm telling you that you save a life. It is beyond any. You could pray for 1,000 years, you wouldn't get the hasana of that.
Exactly.
So justice. You cannot complain about the racism of people and then establish it yourself. If you find yourself, you have to then establish justice against yourself. If you can't do that, you're a hypocrite. Right? It's simple. The deen is simple. What is interesting about Malcolm X is he calls himself out.
Yes.
Yes.
Corrects himself publicly. Yeah, he corrects himself. He corrects himself publicly.
Publicly. So, it's simple. I mean, though I think, because sometimes, the whole thing of the Pareto principle that 20% gives 80% of the results.
Yeah.
I think that aspect of Malcolm X is the 1% that gives 90% of the results.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I've seen this in my own life, in that sometimes I'm doing very little worship. But experiencing, wow, Allah, ya Allah, where all this light coming from?
Yes.
Right? But it's because of justice and looking after people. The two things. Justice and be just and look after people. Look after the people around you. We are responsible for our neighbors up to 40 doors. Yeah.
Yeah.
That when Jibril came and was talking about the rights of the neighbor over you, the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was worried that the neighbor would inherit.
Inherit some.
You know?
Right, yes.
So this aspect is, again, because if you don't care about justice, you miss this.
Yeah.
Right? You have to look after your neighbors. How is it that we could be in this land for as long as we have, and we are not, as Muslims, and we're not the champions of justice?
Okay.
How? Then we're far from the deen of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
And I think on that powerful note, I'm going to leave it there for today. We have to. I already know what our next discussion is going to be about, but I'll say it now. We have to speak about then, not for now, but just to let you know, the viewers, how about the issues of establishing justice and rights for people who ostensibly, or what they call to, we believe go against our religion, which I think is a very important discussion to have in the time of LGBTQ and these kind of issues and trans rights and all this stuff. Because the reason why I say it, I don't want to go into it, but the reason why I say this, and maybe you can touch on it briefly, I've noticed that the people on the right, American scholarship, those who lay claim to traditional Islam, those people are saying that Islam is inherently more towards the right of politics. And then what that happens, they cite the issues like the LGBT movement and the issue of family.
Sorry, this is a really simple one.
Yeah. Okay.
Politics is enacted by leaders, by political leaders.
Yes.
I'm sorry, academics are some of the worst people to have in those positions.
Yes.
Right? Including ulama who do not. That is why there is a reason why the Khalif in the early days of Islam had to come from Quraysh.
Yes.
Because they were already the elite.
Yes.
Right? People would listen to them, right? So you cannot have people who do not understand politics establishing your politics.
Yes.
Or you will suffer.
Yes.
And what is the political influence of the Muslim community in the United States? Very little.
Yes.
So I think the scholars need to go and teach their leaders.
Mm-hmm.
They need to teach political leaders who can then go forward and make political decisions. Because the way that you learn from political decisions is that you have to clean up the mess when you get it wrong.
Yes.
And that imposes upon you incredible discipline.
Yes.
And pragmatism.
Yes.
Because you have to save lives.
Yeah.
Because what is the Sharia? You have to prevent the shedding of blood.
Yeah.
And you have to preserve life. Shedding of blood and corruption.
Corruption, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So and these are all in the ayat of وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. The first ayah where Allah says, I'm creating a Khalif.
Yes.
Right? As the purpose of man.
Yes.
Right? So that is what leadership must do.
Yes. Right?
Now, how the issue is how do you understand fasad at that point? But the nature of it is that after a lot of times with fasad, you have to choose the lesser of two evils.
Yes.
And the better of two rights.
Yes.
Yeah, that is it. And so how do you make that? There is always space for that. So I've often find that people want to talk about these things in incredibly idealistic ways.
Exactly.
And they will sacrifice people's lives for an ideal, and that is not the deal.
And on that note, I'm going to leave it there for now. Thank you so much, guys, man. Again, please follow Alex Carberry. Check out his book, Know Yourself. I keep going on about it. Your DMs are open as well for questions, I assume. Yes, so please reach out to me if you have any questions as well. Take care, Sidi. Speak to you soon.
Okay, then. Okay, assalamu alaikum.